Hey guys, how's it going? First of all, I want to say thank you to all the subscribers that we have. I have gotten. We have gotten so close to 100 and everything. And I also want to say that I have read every comment on my 100th episode of Down the Rap of this podcast, and I do want to address a few comments. Yes, I do have a speech impediment. I've had it ever since I was a kid. And everything. And I'm not gonna apologize for it. Also, I do have an accent. I I was born and raised in Alabama. I do live in the Nashville area now. I'm attending school and I do work two jobs up here. And my accent, I've learned to accept that. I have a speech impediment and an accent and everything. So if that's not your thing, then okay. I'm just gonna leave it at that with the respect that my grandparents told me as a kid to treat others the way I want to be treated. For all the rude comments out there, that's your right to have an opinion. Just remember, your words matter and everything else, and I'm a tough cookie, so you're not gonna break me. And everything. But I was so shocked with how many likes the Mount Shasta video got. And I also want to say this: I'm terrible with names, and everything. So if I butchered any names up, I do apologize. Like I said, I try very hard. And just sometimes with names, it's just the words just don't want to come out. And I try very hard, so I don't mean to disrespect anybody and everything. But with that being said, if you're new here, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Also, please subscribe, help a girl out. Um, but today we are going to be talking about Phillip McCraken and everything else. So, how did this guy come up on down the rabbit hole, and why are we going to discuss him? Well, who is Philip McCraken? Well, he's an artist who's known mostly for his bird and animal sculptures that was weird and antiquities and began studying pre-law at the University of Washington. After his stint as an Army Reserve during the Korean War, he came back to UW as an art major. And the famed British sculptor Henry Moore accepted him as a student and influenced him as his lifestyle as well as technique. And he was the winner of the first Governor's Art Award in 1964. And McCracken was has been producing work from his Gimmy's Island home since the mid 1950s, constantly working under new themes, reinventing his work, and defying categorizations. The biography of the Philip McCracken has been reprinted by many companies as well. So, who was this guy? What was his form? What was his idea? I am not an artist. The most I could do is digital art, and that's about it. However, but I think for those that things that a lot of people love about McCracken is that his sculptures tell the conveyance and the delicacy and the strength of the content that coexist in nature. He was delved into areas that was so complex in that the dimensions of meaning in his works have barely begun to grow. Now, he was a Christian Science Monitor art critic Theodore Roof would note that the first thing that strikes him about his work is that every piece of sculpture represents extraordinary fusion of forms and ideas. So, where did he get his form start at? Because we all have a start, right? Um, but in 1994, McCracken spoke of his art in Zen Riddle and saying that the cosmos have become cone. And there has even been an attempting to portray like cosmos in sculptures, but for most of his life, in the natural world of the Puget Sound that has provided his subjects, his family's Skagit Valley roots spread back m- more than 100 years from the time when his great grandfather came west from Colorado to prospect for gold. Then the family down in another way, the Eureka Saloon. Now I've heard about Eureka. Y'all remember like this musical that most of us went through in high school, or was it middle school? It was like the musical Eureka. Yeah, apparently that's what they. Apparently there was something where Eureka would get its name from. and everything. But anyway, the the Eureka Saloon was owned by his grandfather that was ran at the intersection of 4th and Commercial Streets in Anacortes, 80 miles north of Seattle. And Philip's dad was a merchant at various times, selling it and feeding many grains, ice, later, and soft drinks. So, what do we know about Philip? Well, we know he was born November 4th, 1928, in a hospital in nearby Bellingham. He was the youngest of three. He had his older sister was Patricia, and his older brother was William. He and his brother grew up spending much of their time outdoors fishing and learning to hunt, taking summer vacations at the family cottage in Gorans Island, a mile across the water from Anacortes. Now, his earliest interest in art would be traced to this time at the age of 4 when he tried to carve a large boulder to the neighborhood. And only during the last year of his high school experience that he began to find paintings that were more interesting than football. And he graduated from Anacortes High School in 1947, and he entered the University of Washington as a pre-law student. So, when the Korean conflict broke out in 1950, he volunteered as an Army Reserve, and he on and this was until he was promptly called up, and he was sent to Fort Ord for basic training, and then to Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, where for a year he worked as a gunsmith, and he wears the tattoos of a large serpent up the left forearm in the memento of those days. In the later years, he will report for some amusements that the tattoo made him the recipient for some strange notes in Japan, which were subjects such as tattoo signal membership in the I mean, Yakuza, Yakuza, which was basically an organization with similarities to the mafia. So, who were his mentors? While at UW, it it was there, it was not there that he was an art student, and the School of Art had excellent facilities in sculpture, and his professor, Everett Dupin, was generous about allowing students to explore new directions. He also regards French potter Paul Boniface as well in everything else. So, college more than a 4 year commitment. It was his practice to leave. It was his practice to leave the university in the early years to spend as much time as he can doing commercial fishing. Income income from the fishing and from the GI Bill paid for his education and everything. And he graduated from the School of Art in 1954, having won the School of Art prize, determined to be a sculptor. Now, his work bore titles such as Rainforest Farms and Heron already showed and marked personal style. Now, McCracken also asked himself who might be able to teach him how to navigate the real world successfully, how to balance life and work as an artist, and about commissions and contracts and everything else. Now, shortly before he graduated, he wrote to the British sculptor asking him to be allowed to become Moore's assistant for a few months, and he responded with send photographs, which at that time that actually meant something, right? Nowadays you say send photographs, we know what that means, right? But they don't say photographs now, do they? Now, he did and was swiftly invited to come to England, and Philip went on to was spend the summer at the 1953 in Moore studio in the village of Much Haddam in Hertfordshire, which was 25 miles north of London. Now, Moore had four other apprentices that summer, two Australians and two Englishmen, all who received a modest stipend for their work, and McCracken stayed at the pub in the village, which was a short bike ride from the studio. So, what about his lifestyle and his more profound effect? Well, from his acquaintance with Mark Toby and Morris Graves, both of whom had lost a temperament, he had perceived that being an artist meant living as a single minded loner. And Morris knocked a notion onto his ear in a small, rocky, stocky man of the Schubert vitality. Um, Moore had more intellect. intellectual life and was devoted to his wife and family. And he modeled a socially integrated alternative to the lifestyles of the artist and everything else. So, on the ship to England, McCracken had met and fallen in love with Anne McFettridge, who was a graduate of the Mount Holyoke and Cornell Universities, and who was also on her way to London too for her studies into 17th and 18th century British music, art, and architecture and literature. Now, her eventual aim was to write a curricular for NY State high schools, and at Summer's End, she came to Much Haddam, where she and McCracken were wed in their 12th century Norman village church with Moore as the best man. Now, McCracken had grown up Catholic and was a Presbyterian, and the wedding was Episcopalian. How does that happen? I'm very curious. Catholic, Presbyterian, married Episcopalian? Oh, like, I'm very interesting in that one. But anyway, so would Philip and Anne move back to the States? Well, yes. They would move back to they would move back to New York for easy forays into the city's museum and art galleries. And Graves, whom Miss Grafton was described as a generous spirit, introduced him to the Willard Gallery as one of them and everything else. So now, what about his home in San Juan? Well, McCracken's work was going well, but he missed the skies and the forests in the Pacific Northwest and everything else. So they were moved to Gims Island, and today the 4 by 8 mile island has slightly more than 300 registered voters, and in 1955 it had 100. Keep that in mind. So Anne and Philip, they would have 3 sons, and unspooled in Eden, as they called it. So Tim was born Labor Day, 1955. 17 months later, Robert was born on Valentine's Day, 1957. And I love this. Their youngest son, can we guess what holiday he was born? 4th of July, 1959. That is just like, imagine having to be like, imagine that, like, oh yeah, all my kids were born on holidays. So if you forgot your child's birthday, you had no excuse, right? And everything. Now, there is some nostalgia that when it came to Sunrise with the connection of McCracken's series of Irish ancestors who came to the U.S. for the potato famine and everything else. But what do y'all think of McCracken? Sounds like if I was an artist and really into art, I think I could find myself wanting to know more about this guy and get into his artwork and everything else. But like I said, thank y'all for listening. I know I started the video off different, but I really wanted to address a few things. But that is it. You can join me next time as we're going to be talking about the real life tooth fairy. Ooh, the horror behind it. And I also just want to say October is my favorite month, so you're not going to bring down my mood anytime soon.